Back in the day, when doing a Harlem Shake meant you were doing this and not this, my dad went to work and my mom was a stay-at-home mom to 6 kids. Now, in order to keep us in line, she was always telling us about these rules, one of them being that we needed to leave her alone when she was taking a nap or watching Ricky Lake. Now, after a while, that rule just didn't matter to us because we outnumbered her 6-1. She very quickly realized that she needed to keep us busy more than she could keep us in check. And so we baked, and we liked it because we got to mix the batter, lick the spoon, all that good stuff. The only part of baking that we didn't like was the boring part, which is where the batter has to go into the oven. Now let's fast forward to when I meet my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I went over to her house and I was like, hey, I bake really good cakes. I know, super random, but when you're dating, you gotta whip out all the tricks. And so I basically do what I saw my mom do. We make the batter, we mix it, we lick the spoons, and we put it in the oven. And then something strange happened. When it was time to put the cake in the oven, I told my then girlfriend, hey, now we have to leave the room and be very quiet so that the cake will rise. She goes, what? And I'm like, yeah, when you're baking a cake, you put it in the oven and then you have to be very quiet so that It was in that moment that I realized my mom played a trick on us. Sure, baking a cake with her kids was fun, but getting us to be quiet so that she could take a nap was even more fun. I learned a very important lesson about manipulation that day. And that lesson is this: sometimes the rules don't change at all. We just make them look different. Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Greg, back with another episode of All Black Everything. Now today we're going to be talking about the 13th Amendment, and not just the 13th Amendment, but the loophole that is in the 13th Amendment that allows for America to continue to enslave people. I know, it's a mouthful. Check this out. The 13th Amendment says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. The part of the 13th Amendment that says except as a punishment for crime is what is considered to be a loophole. So what the 13th Amendment really meant was you can't buy, sell, or trade humans in America anymore, but if you can convict them and imprison them, they're serving for life. Now I know what you're thinking, right? Greg, big deal, they freed the slaves. All they have to do is just stay out of trouble, right? Well, it wasn't that easy. When the United States freed hundreds of thousands of enslaved black people who only knew how to rely on their white masters, they kind of put them between a rock and a hard place. For example, newly freed black people in America were not allowed to know how to read. It literally was against the law. You know what else was against the law? Owning property, or working without written permission from a white person, or having permission from a white person but not having the written statement that you had permission. But get this, even if you presented that written permission in your defense, the presentation to that was an admission to guilt that you knew how to read, which was also against the law, which meant you could be arrested, and you guessed it, now you're a slave again. And that's pretty tiring, so tiring that a lot of freed black slaves just resorted back to slavery because it was easier, a lot easier than navigating their newfound freedom. Slave codes and Jim Crow laws were put in place by Southern Confederate states in order to heavily police black people in America. One wrong move, and I mean like a small wrong move, could land a black person in jail. And this only got worse as time progressed, because even when Jim Crow laws and slave codes were put to an end, America and its politicians continued to put forth acts that basically funneled black people into the prison system. For instance, the war on drugs. It was an initiative put in place by Richard Nixon in 1971, and it aided in the mass incarceration of black people in America. Before the 1980s, more than 350,000 blacks in the United States were in the prison system because of drug use and addiction. And not just because of drug use and addiction, but because drug use was treated as a crime and not as a public health issue. In the Netflix documentary 13th, many congressmen and government officials who were active in the 1980s and 90s admit that there was a deliberate and unfair war on drugs in black communities that aimed to unfairly subject black men in poor neighborhoods to unnecessarily long prison sentences. Now, by the new millennium, the black prison population was at more than 800,000, and this was mostly by way of this loophole in the 13th Amendment, which says that if you can imprison a person, you can enslave them legally. And you're probably thinking, Greg, why do I need to know this? How does this relate to 2020? Well, this is why. In 1865, the freeing of enslaved black people economically crippled the Southern Confederate States. In fact, it's arguable that the free labor that enslaved black people provided made America the financial superpower that it is today. And that's important because in 2020, prisons aren't just run like government facilities anymore. No, they're run like businesses with private owners who pay cities incentives when their law enforcement keeps those private institutions full. And a full prison means more enslaved people. And because of the way the 13th Amendment is written, those enslaved people can be involuntary servants for life. And now the prison system in the United States of America looks a lot like the plantation back in slavery times in the southern states. Except the workers aren't just picking cotton anymore. What it looks like today is they're processing our favorite foods or working in call centers to fix our LTE needs. Yeah, it's true. Some of our favorite businesses rely on prison labor. Now remember that forced labor like this only existed in Southern Confederate states, but the writing of the 13th Amendment makes it so that a person can be a slave of any state in any region now. And so whether done on purpose or not, essentially the 13th Amendment took slavery from the South and legalized it through the United States prison system so that now every region can have a piece of the slavery pie. And so shout out to all the parents, the good parents like my mom, and the parents of this country, the forefathers, who knew one very important thing. And it's that we don't ever change the rules. We just change what we call them. My name is Greg, and this has been another episode of All Black Everything. Peace.